Yep. As the end of my research of these Brownie photos and the telescope photos, and also the later photos, which happened about a month later on the 13th December 1952, I made this book about the George Adamski encounter and the photographic evidence. This was that was published in 2018, and I think it caused quite a stir in some circles because they were a little bit shocked that some things in those photos people had never seen. So I think it made people's eyebrows lift a little bit. And I had a lot of contact from people, mails about what that they wanted to buy that book. And this is a book that sells extremely well, even though I don't really care about earning anything. Everything I get from this book is given in to another organization which just use it to give it to poor people. So it's
charity.
Charity, exactly. Yeah,
and also to add to that, you and I met in Copenhagen, and my wife was with me, and we had a nice dinner and discussion, and I had brought along original negatives, and I will never forget the look on your face when you looked at this package in my hand in which I had original 1950s negatives. This was the real thing, not something just.
And that was what I based this on, because I had seen the physical evidence, the original negatives, and that made a whole lot of difference.
Well, it did something else for which I will be eternally grateful as well, and that is we talked about earlier that every decade had their litmus test of examinations, in order to prove or disprove things. And already starting through the 50s, George's pictures had passed every decade's examination phase. And so this kind of brought it up to modern speed with the use of technology. And not only did it give exposure to such a prolific amount of information, but boy, did it bring the house crashing down on so many of the Adamski critics and naysayers. They didn't know what to do or say. And so they quickly tried to distance themselves because, of course, there is the old adage, either put up or shut up. And since they didn't have any material, they didn't have, in essence, any substance in order to once again bash Adamski, they found themselves in a very precarious position. And they remain so to this day. And I'm going to have to say, with a little bit of glee, which I probably shouldn't have, I love it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, but I think it also maybe, I think with all your appearances also on shows and radio and TV, on YouTube, it did make a renewed interest in the Adamski file in general. I think it has, because suddenly you hear a lot more about George Adamski and his case than you ever had before 2018, 19, something like that.
Yeah, that's true. I have done a significant amount of interviews, YouTube programs, given access to the press, whether it happens to be Prometheus for their programs to use George's pictures, and other organizations as well, and both overseas and domestically. Interestingly enough, overseas there is a much greater interest and a much greater willingness to look at things from the rational and from the data and factual standpoint. But either way, there has been a certain amount of resurgence, and we'll see, how long it's lasting. It's been my experience that things go in cycles. There's a bubble in which everybody, there was a while there when my new book came out last year, I was getting called by everybody, do this show, do this show, do this show. And then when they found out that in my book I am providing definitive answers and dispelling a lot of the mythology and psychism behind this subject and giving hard concrete facts, then in retrospect, a lot of them now have, they all told me, well, let's do more programs about this. And I never heard from them again,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
fine because I'm not on a crusade. I'm
No,
putting my material out. And if you are willing to take a look at it, then be my guest.
yeah, yeah. That's a good position to have, actually. You have done plenty, Glenn, during those many years. So you have done your bit, let's say it like that. But let me continue with the actually when Adamski had that contact, the space person actually asked, so they knew that he had taken the photograph of the ship. They posed for him, I'm sure. So when they hovered about the crest, and he took those telescope photos. So he asked if he could get some of one of the films that he had taken, one of the negatives, if you could get that holder, the film holder, to take from Adamski. And Adamski gave him one.
And let's also let the listener understand that this particular visitor did not speak English at that time.
Nope.
In later encounters George had with him, the fellow had learned to speak English and explained how easy it was using a musical-based system that they use on their worlds to learn languages. So what he did is he motioned. For instance, he cleared off the sand at their feet where he had left his footprints and drew the solar system, and then pointed to where they were now, the third orbit, and then pointed to where he came from. Yeah. And also concerning the glass plate, he motioned to George's jacket where he had on the side the glass plates in, the emulsified, unexposed ones, and George reached out and handed him one. I mean, who wouldn't do that under such a historic occasion as this?
Yeah, exactly. But that film holder suddenly becomes a point of interest because 3 weeks later, the visitor came back at Palomar Gardens, and that is what I'm going to talk about now. So I will again share the screen, and I will show you some research I did on some of the other photos that he took on that day, because now he took some better pictures. Let's call them much better. It began in the morning at about 9 o'clock local time, when he had heard, I think he had heard some aircraft flying over the area, and he suddenly, at some point in time, in the morning, he spotted some kind of reflection in the sky, and he thought that maybe the craft had come back from that day, because he understood it. The plate that he had given to the space person would be given back at some point. And perhaps that day was the day. And that was the 13th of December, 1952, about 3 weeks later from 20th November. So what I have calculated was his first picture that he took on the morning was either this picture or this picture. I am not sure, because what he writes in Flying Saucers Have Landed, that is that the first picture, he understood that the object was too large for the ocular. So it could either be this, but I think it is this. So if this was the first picture, I will start looking at this in detail. So I will go back to out of this and go. I made a PDF file, which is actually available on my website, which is www.olree.dk, where you can download this file for free. So these are the 5 images that he took on the day. I think he took a couple more, but these are the 5 that I have looked at in detail. And let's go down here. These are the camera details that I give, which a camera was that he used, and that the film was always developed at DJ Detweiler in Carlsbad, about 40 miles away from where he lived. And this was the usual place that Adamski used to get his film developed. So here I deal with the first photo. I decided that this was the first photo at the time that I did the research. I'm not sure, I'm still not sure, but let's begin with this photo. This shows a lot of detail compared to the one he took out in the desert in the first one, in the first contact. So this I would call the second contact, even though there were no personal contact, but it was definitely a photographic opportunity for Adamski that day. So it hovered and it posed for him again. He used his telescope, as you can see the ocular curvature of the where he looked in, where the camera was sitting on, and this goes all the way around. And that was what he saw in the first photo. The one ball condenser was here, the engine below, and the lens here. You can see two portholes here, only the slight one of this, and this is another one. This is the top of the craft. This is one of the rotating arcs, of the discs under the craft, and this is another one, and there's another one in here. So there's three some kind of rotating things under the craft, which is part of the engine. Let's call it part of the engine. So this was the first one. I cleaned it up because it was very dirty. I thought I would clean it up so we can see it a little better. And you can see that the sun is actually hitting the ball and the engine, and you can see a shadow coming over here, which tells us what time of day it was. So it was around the 9 o'clock. That is quite definitely in December. That is how the sun would be positioned. If the craft suddenly, it was not level with the ground, it was up on the side. So it moved at that point in time. It was quite astonishing that he got that good picture. So I have studied that negative. That was one of the negatives that Glenn brought to Copenhagen in 2018. And I'm certainly convinced that this was a telescopic picture. There is a totally graying effect on the edge of that craft. That is impossible to do with a model. It would have been crystal sharp had it been a model close to the camera. That would not be possible, this would not be possible. That is what convinced me 100%. So there is also, you can see some kind of energy through the hull. That is also possible to see if you really zoom in. We will do that later. So I continued. What appears here on the ball is not a shadow, which many people have thought it was. It has something to do with the propulsion system which these three balls are part of. So somehow it is possible maybe to separate the upper part and the lower part. I don't know, but this is definitely part of the maneuvering system. Let's call it maneuvering. Even though people have called it a landing gear, it is, like Glenn said, it is not a landing gear.
It's called a 3-ball condenser, and
Yes.
It is not a landing gear.
No, it's not. It is used to actually keep the craft hovering at that position before when people have to get in and out of the craft. It never touches down on these balls. Never. So this is also, you can see sharp edges from the sun angle on the engine part, which is actually quite interesting. This was the first image. And you can also see some reflections in the upper part of you can actually see reflection from the cabin down on the part of the craft, on the top craft, which is impossible to do if this is a plastic model, which is only maybe a couple of inches large. It's impossible. It's part of the ambient light from the atmosphere, So this is totally difficult to do unless it's a large craft. The second photo, which I now decided this was, which I think is photo 1, but this is the perfect photo actually. We only see 3 portholes in each section, but we know that there is 4 from the last photo. This is an astonishing photo. I have just, etched it in where everything is. And this is actually another evidence that this is a craft a great distance away. It was, I think, about 2,000 to 3,000 feet away when it hovered for Adamski, and that was why he could get it in his telescope and it filled that much. So that is what it looked. The first ball condenser is this. It looks extremely small compared to this one, but that is actually the distortion effect of an object at a large distance, which you look head on. This is actually the real size, what it would look like. So everything of this looks much larger than the one in the front, but they are the same size, exactly the same size. So this is actually, people think that these are different sizes, but they are not if you measure them. You can just take some kind of ruler to the screen and you will see they're exactly the same size.
Yes.
But this is just a perspective, the error of the perspective when you look at something at a great distance. The lens is down here, and the rest part of it is the engine. And you can see some of the rings here. You can actually see all three. 1, 2, 3. That was actually a photo, the original photo I got. I did not get it from Glenn, but I got it from Hans Petersen, which was a Danish representative of the Adamski Foundation in Denmark at a certain point. And that was the best photo that he had. And I asked him for it and he gave it to me. And that's very, very nice. Here again, I talk about the perspective and what you can see in the surface of that craft. Let me just minimize this and let's go to the actual photo that we look at. Then I can better zoom in. You can actually see that there is lighter parts in this in the part of the cabin, which is actually, it looks see-through, which is actually quite stunning.
It's true, because the craft is semi-translucent.
Yeah, you can actually look through the outer part of this cabin. And that is actually something quite spectacular. There are reflections from the sun here. This has been debated quite a bit, but I do believe that they were preparing to open a small hatch to throw the cut film down to Adamski. So maybe they had already opened some part of the craft. There are reflections of the portholes down in the hull, which again has to be a highly reflective material, which cannot be a model. If it's a plastic model or cardboard model, there would be no reflections. It's that simple.
And once again, in order to clarify it, that is a sphere ball on the top and not a ring.
It is. This is a ball. It's a crystal or some kind of, it's a part of the lens system, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is also part of the lens system.
Yes.
Yes. So it's the equivalent. This part is the equivalent of what's down here. And this part here is the equivalent of that little ball. So
right.
This is actually the optic system. It is. So just so we could see it a little bit better, and I have to go into this again. So I will show, this was what I talk about here, that it looks as part of the refractive index, which is the see-through index of the cabin, is made a little bit part. I think they were looking out just to see where Adamski was. They did not use the portholes. They used the part of the cabin, which they could make transparent. So yes. They looked through the cabin to have a little look. It could be two faces, these white parts. Could be. Nothing sure, but it could be. And this was a little bit about the portholes, how some of the portholes can be. I think this shows a little bit of an electronic effect, which I think that the portholes can be created by electronics. That means that they can be, this can be a solid cabin, but it can also be made to look like portholes.
What happens is it looks like the iris of a camera.
Yeah, exactly.
And when it closes, then there comes a filament in front, and so it looks like a solid piece. Yeah, and this looks a little bit disturbed, like it's opening or closing. I don't really know what it's doing, but it's partly not a hole, because it looks like it's closing. And this is more rigid, and this is very rigid. So this is like, you can definitely see an electronic effect here, that it's about to close or open. Something is definitely happening here. And it looks interesting. I've never, until I examined these, I had never really observed this, but it looks like a disturbance in the cabin, because it is being generated, I think. So, and there's also some reflections internally in the top of the craft, and the cupola, which somebody called just a ball on top, which is also part of the lens system.
And there is a reflection of this part down here. And actually also the upper part of that, where this rotating ring goes about the top of the cabin, this actually looks like the top is not there. It looks like it's out of sync with the rotation. I think it's because of the rotation. Because it looks like
yes.
it just looks like it's transparent, and that it couldn't be if something is rotating through it. So, but it looks really, really weird, and it could just be an optical illusion. It could be. But I tried, as you can see, when I enhanced it, I also tried to make it negative, because you can see stuff when things are the other way around.
Yes,
it's almost like infrared. You can see, your eye sees something different. And there is a lot of disturbance in the copula actually up here. There is a lot of things going on here. So, yeah, it is interesting. This is interesting. And there are many reflections, like you can see that it's a metallic surface. That's pretty interesting. This I call photo 3. For what reason do I call that photo 3? Yeah. I think I think this was actually always shown as the last photo, but I do believe this is photo 3. When it began to move a little bit up to present the last photo, which is this one. I think this is the third photo that we are looking at. This. You can correct me if you think I'm wrong, Glenn, but I think
I think that's a valid assumption.
Yeah, I think this is where it came up and began to show some of the underside, which was revealing quite a lot. But this is also the interesting shot where a lot of things were shown in the windows. You can see part of the inside cabin actually through these portholes, which is interesting.
You can see the fourth porthole.
Yeah, you can see 2 times 4 portholes. You can actually see them.
And there's 3 for a total of 12, because that's a mathematical construction number.
I will just show that so you can actually see that there are 4 portholes on each side. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is undeniable, 4 in each part of this image. Quite a feat to keep that craft that still. That is actually quite an effort, I can tell you. Very nicely done. There is a movement to be seen in this photograph. You can actually see some kind of reflections, and you can see that it is moving upwards at this time that he took this picture. But at the same time, we are seeing a lot of things on the underside. We are seeing the metallic things under here, which those ball condensers are placed at, which reflects these sun glints up in the undersurface. And here you can also see reflections on the underside of this part. You can see so much here.
It also gives you a very good view of the 3 ball condensers, the fact that they are the same size, and they are geometrically placed equally from each other. And you can see them in relationship to the total flange underneath it, where one is not bigger than the other.
Yeah, and they are situated 120 degrees from each other. That is where they are. And they have a movement to them. They can move a little bit, but primarily they rotate. This is they do a rotation. That is why the craft can be balanced and moved. It's quite interesting how the system works. But this was a very nice photograph that Glenn sent me, and I also saw the original negative of that one, which convinced me of everything. The graying effect again of distance, the blurring effect, the movement. This is just impossible. I have tried to make so many things with a model to try to copy all these things that you see in photos. This cannot be copied. It is impossible. So, and here I described the sunlight that hits this ball and is reflected up on the underside. Just think of the effect that you have to arrange. This has to be almost a mirror surface, what is under here, for it to reflect 100% up in that surface. Have you ever seen a model with a mirror surface where people could glue some things on? No. This is just a metallic craft. That's it. That's the explanation. There is no other explanation.
Well, anybody who makes the accusation of a model is either completely naive
Yeah,
or totally ignorant about models
yeah,
and photography. So, I mean,
exactly.
it becomes a interesting accusation,
Yeah,
but they have absolutely no substance and zero proof behind that innuendo. And
yeah.
they have found it much more provocative to just throw out accusations and innuendos and not have to prove their statements.
Exactly. And again, you can see reflections up in, so this is highly metallic, which is under this side where the ball condensers are situated on. So it's just, there are small reflections all around this, which, like I said, if it's a model, you don't think about that. You just want to get the photo. You don't think of that there is reflections on the part of where you have glued the balls on, if it's a fake, right? So
Well, it's not possible. I mean,
no, it's just impossible. It's just
if you
impossible.
look at the middle, if you look at the middle condenser right
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
you can see that the light reflection comes straight down onto the lens portion of it,
exactly.
right there. And
Yeah.
so, no, I mean, at
There
a
are
certain
so many
point,
things that are just impossible to do with,
yeah,
as a,
at a
you know,
certain point, the accusation of a model is just so ludicrous
it is.
that it is hardly even worth even trying to counter anymore. I
And
mean,
you can again see that the cowling up here is glowing. You can see it from, if you compare to the photograph number 2, you just get a little bit of a glow. So it's still, it's just not something you would think of if you're trying to use a model, right? This is
right.
an energy which is up here. So you just have to think about, and now we come to the different portholes and what we could see. I don't think that we see faces. I
Now
think
there's
it's,
some reflection of something behind it.
yeah, this I could see if we like before when we saw that this was partly visible, like you could see through it, transparent. This could be the shoulder of a person standing here.
Yeah, could
So
be.
I don't think it's a face. I think most people have thought that these were face reflections. I don't believe so. I think these are part of a body or something standing there.
Yeah, it just simply proves that there's something behind it.
Something is definitely inside that craft, which is not a model. Again,
Right.
we have to think of all this, and these are reflections because it's moving upwards. So these are actually movement reflections, which, and also down here at the portholes, impossible to make with a model. I have tried to make a 3D model that what we see here is actually what we see in the photo, something like that.
Yeah.
And there's something here, right? The part of a shoulder maybe, or yeah, part of, maybe he was just moving to the window and moved away again. Who knows who was inside? So, but a couple of people was probably inside. And on the other side of the craft, you actually can see part of the cabin again. I do believe that this is actually the upper part of the cabin that you can see up here. This is a lighter part of the inside, and this is a darker part of the inside.
Yeah, it looks like you can see the inside of the dome. Mhm.
Yeah, this is actually, I think, I'm showing that this is what you actually can see, and I think I did a 3D as well, where you can actually see this is actually part of the dome that you see
Yeah.
up here.
Yeah.
And this is part of the coil going out this way. And this is actually part of the central column that you can see perhaps here. Interesting, actually.
Yeah,
Um,
because the description has been that the central dome is like a series of swirling light pattern,
yeah,
that goes around and around and around up towards the top.
yeah. And this is the official last photo that the general public knows about. I saw an additional one that Brent brought, which looked almost like this, but was a little bit like a movement was happening, so it was a little bit blurred. I'm a little bit annoyed that he never sent me a copy of that, but that's how he that's how he is.
I will send you a copy.
No,
I'm
that's
old.
fine.
I'm old now, so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
that's
claim that my
fine, then.
memory
That's
is in
fine,
a,
then. No.
you know.
This is the best one, so that's fine. But I'm sure that Adamski, as this was his last photo before it came close, I think he may have snapped a few more of this angle.
Yeah, there are several additional
Yeah,
negatives of
yeah.
that, partial and then blurred a bit. So I'll have to
I'm
do a
sure
little.
that he, like he did with his telescope in the desert, I think he did maybe a 6 or 7 or whatever. of this
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but here we clearly see the 3 ball condensers at 120 degrees from each other, same size. Because it's the same size and they look the same, they are at a great distance. Again, a couple of thousand feet at least. The lens here, the engine here, with a rotating ring around the engine, actually, which I don't know if he ever described, but I do believe that's a rotating ring. There's a ring here, and the outer ring. So that's an interesting shot. You can actually see.
And that's the one that was exposed by Dr. Alan Hynek,
Yes.
where he first said all of this is just nonsense, and then a few years later, a decade later, he reversed himself, and we have a copy of that article where he says, well, perhaps I've been wrong, and he's holding a picture of that particular Adamski.
He was quite fond of that picture, actually. So, yeah, it is a fantastic picture. It has never been photographed like that before, not published anyway of anyone. I do believe that a lady took a photo of the same craft hanging on its upside down, actually. She took a lot of color photos of a craft, similar craft, where you could also see the button in color. They have never been published, but I do remember that a lady took a few photos of the same craft.
Right. Well, as you mentioned earlier with the other photographs that George took of the same thing, he tried to select the very best. So if he took 4 pictures and some of them were partial and some of them were blurred, and this happened to be the best one out of that group, that's the one that he made available to the public. Because these clowns that are the skeptics, they have 2 statements. One, it's either too blurry and you can't tell what it is, according to them, or 2, it's too clear, so obviously it can't be real.
It must be
there's no satisfying them. So, but George tried to pick the very best pictures that he took out of his lot to make available to the public so that they could actually, in reality, see things. And that's how we came across his books in the Library of Congress under A for Adamski. Flying saucers have landed inside the spaceships.
And it is a great book. If anybody can get it, I recommend it to anyone. And I think you can get it at Adamski Foundation and maybe also on the internet in general.
Yes, you can get it from me at the foundation, or you can get it from Amazon, and I have it also available on abe.com, and also eBay. So the originals are available.
The originals are definitely worth reading. But this is also a great look where you look up. You actually look up and see quite a few things that you could gather something from. And that is, you can see reflections on this rotating ring. You can see different reflections over here, and you can see the curvature of that one. There's so much to see in this picture, actually. You can again see the inside of the cupola up here, and the cabin, the rest of the cabin. You can see the same shoulder pattern or whatever it is here. It could be part of the cabin. I have no idea. It could also be a chart inside the cabin on the wall. Who knows? It looks just to be a little bit high up. If somebody
it could
is
be part
standing
of the internal construction.
it could be. It could be
benches or instrument panels. Or my God,
Let me go back to this because I think I talk about this. Again, you can see the curvature here. You can see that it's lighter on the top, the same as the previous photo. And you can actually see that I've tried to make a little short of a just to show the top part of the cupola, and this is the cabin. Just so we can see something. And the same thing on the other side. It is lighter on the top part of the in these portholes. So there is something. We are looking through some windows, definitely.
Yes.
That cannot be argued. And I think I also conclude again that the computer still, just to read what I have written myself, it is a distance about 35 feet for the object, a distance 2,500 feet to 3,000, which I think Adamski said in his book. That was his calculation. And I've shown the computer renditions to the same size as the 4 photos. It has been done exactly the same way with the same measurements. And I think that this was when the last picture was actually taken which was this picture. Originally ascribed to a different person, but Glenn has told me, and I don't know if I may say it, but I think I will anyway, that it was actually taken with the Brownie camera by Adamski.
That's correct. George
Yes.
Adamski took this picture when this craft came down below the tree levels, hovered, hatch opened, and the package dropped off with the glass plate inscriptions in it.
Yeah.
And what George did is he said there were some visiting people on the property, and one fellow by the name of Baker. And George said to him, well, I've taken quite a few of these pictures. Why don't you claim that you took this one so I don't look like the only one who knows how to take these pictures?
Yeah.
And for a while, Mr. Baker agreed, but then he received, he had a military background, and he received a great deal of heat and persecution for that. So then he later said, no, it wasn't I who took it. It was George who took it. And George said, okay, no problem. Yeah, I took it. So that's that.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any difference who takes the damn picture.
No, exactly.
The fact
Exactly.
is the picture's there.
Yeah, exactly. And perhaps other people took some photos which we have never seen. I don't know.
Oh, yes. Other people that were on property when one of these craft landed. And so, yeah, I'm sure there are other pictures out there floating around.
Definitely other people. But this again was the original that Glenn sent me a couple of years back. And I could estimate that there was something on the cabin, maybe a couple of portholes, but they are not really that clear. So I tried to enhance it a little bit and clear it up. This would have been the original exposure. This is definitely overexposed to give the craft some shape. You can see that the trees are overexposed. Everything about this picture is overexposed. But there are some things in the sky which people have never actually talked about. But we will take a little look at that. At the time, I'm sure that this craft was not alone in the sky when it posed for Adamski and flew over. That was extremely dangerous to do this. Very dangerous. Because there has also been planes flying over the property before that craft was visible. So there's a light here, there's a dark thing here, there's a light just over the rim here. So some probes were definitely monitoring the situation, I think.
Always.
Yeah, I'm sure about that. But when you try to expose it correctly for the trees, the object will get a little bit darker, but you will be able to see two portholes. So that is very nice. And you will be able to see the coil on the top of the cabin, but nothing of the under. So I, again, overexposed it, cleaned it up, and you can see the one ball here, one ball there, and there's another ball over here.
Yes.
So they are saying the three, again, it's the same craft. There's a lens system down here, the engine down here, the rotating ones underneath. So everything is the same size, and it is the same size.
Yes.
So that is quite interesting. That was, I assume, that the plate has just been dropped and it flew over Adamski's head.
Excellent work. Yeah.
That is what I said here. I'm sure that some people will feel that my conclusions are wrong, but do remember that I have actually handled 5 of the original negatives and examined them closely. I could not find anything to the best of my ability which would indicate manipulations, strings, double exposures, or anything of that connection. They just looked like the real thing, like an 2,500 to 3,000 feet distance taken through a 6-inch reflective telescope showing an object 30 to 35 feet in diameter. And I stated that and I signed it on April 23rd of April 2019. And I still stand by those examinations.
Well, your conclusions have been the same conclusions that were drawn by all the other professionals who had examined these photos as well.
Yeah. And we could just look at some of the, as you can see, there is definitely something in the sky here. And also on this rim. There is something. It is not dirt. I removed all the dirt from this photo. And these were the things that remained. So something is there.
Excellent.
And there is also an effect from the coil here. That's a reflection effect somehow.
Make yourself a note to send me this too.
Yes, I will. I think I have sent it to you, Clint, but that's fine. Okay. And I think this is also a little bit showing what Adamski and how he was. look a little bit coy, looking up to the sky, holding the best of his frame
Yeah.
from that day, and a page from his book, Flying Saucers Have Landed.
Yeah, this was a publicity photo.
Yeah, I think it's perfect.
I don't recall for whom it was. It may have been in Europe, but
But it's perfect.
It's a nice
Yeah.
souvenir.
It shows exactly who Adamski was. He had a little, and this is also like I promised, I would say, the affidavit from Detweiler, who was his preferred one who processed his films.
Yeah.
I know it's from 51, but it's still from all the telescope views that Glenn showed. They are included in this. So he certifies that the films was finished by the undersigned, Mr. Detweiler, have not been retouched or otherwise altered in finishing the film or making the enlargement therefrom. Witnessed by hand and sealed this day and date the first above written. So he confirmed that everything was untouched when he had developed
received it. Yes, and that's not the only affidavit we have too.
No,
but
I'm sure you have more than that. So, but this actually describes the contact in the desert plus the return of the craft and the film.
Beautiful.
Which was this plate that you showed, Glenn. This was the original plate, and this was the comparison with Marcel Homé.
Yeah.
Yeah, who actually, both of these guys were in Copenhagen in 1963 on a conference. Unfortunately, I was only 7 years old at that time, so I could not attend.
I have a picture of Marcel Homé at that conference talking, and I also have a copy of an article where he had said that he was not aware of the Adamski symbols at all until after he had discovered his, and that he made a statement that he has never found Adamski to be untruthful in anything he said.
No.
Well, thank you, Renee, for that excellent representation and analysis work that you've done concerning some of the Adamski materials. I would like to add to the point that when I met Renee, I found him to be a non-biased researcher. In other words, our first communications were that he wasn't a ardent Adamski supporter, and he wasn't an ardent Adamski critic.
No.
And that he wanted to chase the technical and factual data in such a way as to not only prove to himself the validity of what he was examining, but also in the secondary nature, should that come in fruition for you or him, that you would make that available to the public as well. So in other words, I want to make sure people know and understand that this is not just material and research conducted by people who wish to make something so. No, it is research and data collected in order to provide actual factual data.
Yeah.
And we followed the material regardless of where it would lead.
Exactly.
And recently, I was requested by the director of a UFO organization in Europe to supply him with the original negatives as I had done Rene. And that because he had once given one of the original pictures from the Desert Center contact, as Rene had mentioned, to that researcher's technical advisor. And so consequently, he had come back with those specific items being in conjunction with what Rene found, but he wasn't willing to go on record. So I said, okay, well, what's there to be afraid of? Be a man. And so I provided this European researcher with more negatives, and that was months ago, and I haven't heard anything since. And I know for a fact too that they are not Adamski supporters, but it doesn't make any difference whether you like somebody or not. What makes the difference is the quality and the validity of the material they represent.
Yeah.
And so
it's all about the data.
It's about the data.
Yeah.
Okay, what we're going to take a look at is that we're going to take a look at some frames from the Adamski film in 1957 in Mexico. And what happened is,
Well, and maybe a little bit, you can make some background. What was Adamski doing in Mexico in 1957 when he took that film?
well, what happened was in 1957, they were going down to the Guadalajara Lake Chapala area. First of all, they wanted to be on holiday because it had been a very strenuous and stressful number of years with all the activity, not only the public interest, the military interest, the influences from the national security agencies, the CIA and the FBI, the Men in Black. And so there was a whole plethora of things where they decided they just, everybody needs a vacation and they wanted to go down there and spend a little time. And also they were interested in looking at perhaps some property down there as well, because they found that in those days in Mexico, there wasn't as much as a suppressed um, uh, aura of negativity around this particular field.
Yeah, there were
So
more.
they went down there in December of 57 and stayed through the summer of 58. And the film shows them driving along the road, and in the distance there, you could see the dome and the cabin of the saucer just sitting just below the tree level. And when you look at the next picture, you can see it a little bit better. It's up a little higher. It's more metallic in nature. And then once again, the more you look at as you bring the image closer and closer, you can see the dome, you can see the sphere, you can see almost a translucent quality to the hull. You can see the sun shining on this part of the dome. And it's quite an extraordinary piece of film.
Yeah.
And then here's the latest enlargement, which definitely shows you it's not a part of a tree or a regular structure.
Oh, no.
And then it moved behind the tree. And as they got closer, here is a registering disc that on the film is moving around like this all over the frame, trying to get their attention to point the camera towards this direction. Because behind the tree line, you can see the dome and the full flange of that scout ship with the sun reflecting on it behind the tree. And the complete portion of this film showed the rest of the craft slowly becoming fully solid. Now, this does not mean it materialized or faded or any of those things. They have an optical device that bends light rays around a device or around a person that makes you invisible to the eyesight, because the light rays go around the object and continue on. And as we all know, that you see what is reflected back to your cornea and brain, because in reality it's your brain that sees and not your eyes.
Yeah.
They're just the vessel upon which the gathered light penetrates and continues onto the brain.
Glenn, I can remember when I saw that film clip the first time, which did not show the craft becoming fully visible. And like you described, that was taken by a film company or missed by a film company. But the part that this film clip shows is just astounding. I think I saw the film clip 100 times before I understood that it was getting see-through and more, visible. That
Solid,
was the most strange thing for my brain to I could not perceive it.
We showed
just looked like it changed shape, it just looked weird.
Yeah, my parents showed this film on ABC in Washington, D.C., and above the studio is a stage or deck which has glass fronts to it, and the executives were standing up there along with some national security operatives, and they saw this film in its entirety where the whole ship becomes solid, and they refused to give the film back to us.
Why?
My father took lawyers and fought for months to get the film back. And all we got back was up to this portion. The rest of the film was cut.
Yeah,
And we never
that
got
is
the rest of it back. But
so
still,
unfortunate.
considering what we do have, it is quite
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is astounding.
an extraordinary piece of film.
Oh, it is. It is.
Another interesting
And you can you can actually see the Mexico film as part of the George Adamski films, which we have on YouTube, both on Glenn's channel and my channel.
That's true. And
Yeah.
so they are available there for you to go back and forth.
Yeah.
I didn't want to overshow things, so there
No,
was
that's
too much
fine.
redundancy. The next picture was taken by George Adamski over the Mount Palomar area of a mothership. You can see that the energy field is only lightly energized, but you get one heck of a lot of more bang for your buck. Over here, you can see a craft that
Yeah,
is
you can zoom in. You can go further than that.
fully energized.
Yeah.
As you see the field around it. But more importantly, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see what else we got. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You see at least 12 other craft.
Yeah.
That are around this mothership.
This
And
is a fantastic photo.
I mean, when you think about it, this is one heck of a photo.
Yeah.
And you can still go up to Mount Palomar along that Ridge Mountain Road that goes from the central part down towards the national park, which is Doane Valley. And we've driven it many times to get the angle and take other pictures of it. And it shows you exactly the type of craft that George saw and reported to Project Blue Book that was included in the 1949 dossier.
Glenn, give me an estimate. How large do you think that craft is? I have calculated.
Well, this one.
What do you think?
This one doesn't have the energy field so highly energized, and so you see more of the hull of the craft itself. Not totally, because otherwise then you would see the rings that are running along the length of it. But something.
What do you think? What do you think?
It would be pure speculation. I would have to know distance from the lens, altitude, and also distance from where I was standing to this particular to the geological formations that are around.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say that it's probably not less than 2,000 feet.
I think it's much larger than you think.
It probably is, but since I'm not an expert on that, I will give it my best estimate, and God knows, it could be a lot larger than that. When you look at the mountain range from here to here, down below it, it looks like this entire distance could be well over a mile or two.
2 miles. I think you're not far off if you say 2 miles.
Yeah, so that could be a much more accurate estimate of that.
So many people must have seen that craft.
Oh, well, remember, and here's the close-up of that. But remember that area was not highly traveled.
No.
Although there was obviously the community for the observatory up on the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And also there's a little village that is where the astronomers eventually, the houses were built for them and for the staff to take care of the observatory facility. So those people there. So I mean, I would say anybody who was there at the time couldn't have missed it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and it was in the middle of the day, it looks like. So
middle of the day, you betcha. So anyway, so it shows a bunch of the craft both energized and also not. Just to give you an idea, my father took this picture out of the Boeing 707 when we were coming back from his European lecture tour in 1966. And down below us, this is part of a motion picture footage, by the way, because the craft comes into the frame, and then slowly as the jet passes by, you can see the nacelle of the number 2 engine. And so you can see this same shape exactly with the 2 scouts. Now this was, we were probably in the mid 30,000 feet, and this was probably down around 20.
Yeah.
So the size of this beast must have been also at
Yeah.
least a pound,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah.
Well, it
Definitely.
goes to show you that that others pictures were taken.
Yeah.
I'm going to show the film for the Wisconsin footage, which I believe was 1961, sometimes when my mind gets tired. But anyway, this is the Wisconsin footage that George Adamski took of one of these craft. Notice that it moves not only sideways at high rates of speed and stoppage, but also up and down and forward and backwards towards you and away from you.
Yeah.
And remind you, no drones in those times.
No. No.
And no vehicles of this earth constructed anywhere capable of these type of maneuvers to the benefit of the pilots within them. They
And
would have
there's definitely no wings on this craft. You can
no
see that
wings
it's an oval
whatsoever.
shape.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of still photos as well.
This is
And-
just an amazing piece of film. I just enjoy this piece of film so much because it really it just has to close the mouth of every skeptic because
Oh,
you
yeah.
cannot deny that piece of film. It's data again. It's objective data, and people don't even care that it exists.
There's a picture of that craft, the
Yeah.
still shot from the film frame.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, I've looked at 200 separate film stills from that one, and this is one of them.
mhm.
And the other one is the next
And
one.
the
I
other
think.
one near to the tree,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's just an amazing piece of film.
There
It's
you
just,
go. So
yeah. I don't know what to say.
anybody who says George Adamski was
Yeah.
a faker, I just have to laugh myself stupid when I hear
Yeah.
this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The next shot comes in 64, and this is in Vista, California, right at the old house, which was not far from here at Lado de Loma, where George moved in December of 64, Alice. And you can see this craft maneuvering across the sky and back and forth behind the telephone wires and then disappearing. And so we've run it a couple times to give it slow it a little bit down to make it a little bit easier to see. And people say, well, why does it move so erratically? Because we're so used to airplanes. We don't want them to move erratic because then it bumps and we get scared. Remember, in their field within the ship, they feel nothing.
They feel nothing.
There's absolutely no feeling of motion whatsoever.
Exactly.
And this is a good freeze frame of one of the frames. You can just barely see two of the ball condensers and a little bit of a dome to the top of it. And this one here as well, more so. And then the last one here, that one too has a little bit more of a cabin view over the top. But and this is just some of the films that George has. I still have the Boston footage and some other footage. But one of the most prolific ones that George took was in February 26th of 1965, just a month
before his death. Yeah,
a month and a half before he passed away in Silver Springs. And the film starts with what we call a small registering disc that came down between the trees and measured the distances that are available. And you will see that when you look at this, that it moves behind the tree too.
But again, when the large craft came down, it's so dangerous what they did.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see here that it moved behind the tree. This is another piece of delightful film analysis that Rene made available due to his expertise. And boy, did that give the critics heartburn. They didn't know what to say because they've tried so hard.
I think there's one more still where it's actually behind the tree.
Yeah, and that one's right here.
That one.
There you
That one,
go.
yeah, that one.
And so what happens is when you see the frames of the larger craft that came down, you will see that it mimes the maneuvering of the smaller registering disc exactly, because the data and telemetry of the distances and the type of obstructions was fed directly into the computer of the saucer. This is what
Exactly.
the space people said.
Exactly.
You can, whether you're taking my word or not, that's their exact words.
Yeah.
And so when later on the saucer craft came skipping across the trees into the same area, here's one of the frames. It started to maneuver exactly the same as the registering disc, and it started to take one of its 3 ball condensers and retract it and extend it as it was moving. Impossible for a model to do.
Yeah.
Secondly, they claim, oh, well, this was cut out on a piece of board and taped to the window. Wrong again, because you can see that it's 3-dimensional, and there's curvature to the cabin with the portholes, and you have a distortion effect of the hull that comes from the low-level radiation byproduct of the propulsion system.
Yeah.
All of which
you can
is
see on the left
with a model or cutout.
And you can see on the left side of the upper cabin with the portholes, it's straight down the cabin, but on the right side it's skewed.
Yes.
So that means that the field is turning around it.
That's right.
It's so
it's
interesting.
revolving, and the field is also turning. The field is permeating through the
Through
pores of the hull.
Yeah.
It's an intricate part of the system.
Yeah.
It's like it's living, but not living with a consciousness. It's living due to the energy that is living within it.
And this still also proves that this is not a ring on top, because you cannot see it because it's glass.
That's right.
The ball was not up there, the ring was not up there because it's glass.
Right. And
that's
so
why.
This is another frame from the film that shows where the ball condenser has been retracted. You get an oblong elliptical effect once again.
Very, very strange view. Yeah.
Not anything you would get with a model. That's
no.
Sure.
And the cabin is straight on, but the rest of the object is all twisted.
Due to the maneuverability of all the parts and of the electromagnetic field.
Yeah, it's really interesting, this.
And this film was shown, my father on March 13th, arranged with George and my mother and Mrs. Rotifer. We contacted all the news people, Huntley and Brinkley and Cronkite, everybody from every station. And my mother contacted all the embassies that are along Embassy Road there in Washington, past DuPont Center, and invited them all to the Mayflower Hotel where my father worked, and arranged for the press conference. And they came out absolutely flabbergasted. There were other pieces of film that people don't know about that George carried in his briefcase that were I can't even describe. They were just so phenomenal. But anyway, so that was shown to the National Press Corps on March 13th of 1965. George spent his last birthday with us in April. I believe it was 17th. I got a few numbers mixed up in my jarbled old brain. And what happened is he turned to my father and my parents, and he handed him his briefcase. And he says, Fred, I want you to take over for me because I will not be here much longer. And my parents looked at him in total astonishment and said, well, where are you going? And he said, well, I won't be here much longer and living. And so my father says, well, there's absolutely no way that I can fill your shoes. And so, but the basic idea was, George says, you didn't need to fill my shoes. You just need to carry on the work.
Yeah.
And so,
Glenn, can you unshare?
Yes. Well, I got a couple more things to show.
Okay.
Let me get to the story in a second. I just want to show, of course, once again, a clear version of Renee's book. I recommend it to absolutely everybody who is interested in this field. Here's a nice portrait of George, as I also remember him as a child. And then my latest book.
Your book. Yes.
My book, his latest book is out, just came out late last year. I have negotiated 2 foreign countries in Europe to translate and publish. Those contracts are signed. I have another 2 that are ongoing negotiations in the Far East, and I'm going to look for 1 more in Spanish, and then I will have covered most of the globe, which includes all the information that we have been just talking about and much, much more. I hope people will at least give it a shot, and I think you will find it very informative and educating.
It is very illuminating.
As I said, George, after his birthday, about a week after his birthday, passed away. My mother and Madeline took him to the hospital where he passed away from a heart attack. And my father had the briefcase. Alice Wells was with George already since the 30s, and was part of the whole financial structure. George had no money. He owned no house, owned no car. He had $2,500 in his bank account. He owned no property. So the people who are out there claiming that George Adamski got rich from promoting the UFO subject is absolutely garbage. In fact, I have posted the San Diego probate papers on our website at adamskifoundation.com to show these people exactly how ignorant they are. George did not profit from this field. He thought that that would be counter to anything ethical, because this was information available to the world. Most of his overseas publishing contracts in foreign languages were all done without royalties. So he lived a very, shall we say, I wouldn't say a meager, but a simple life, where possessions were not and accumulations were not the emphasis of his existence, unlike so many today. And so when we had the funeral was in Arlington National Cemetery. Alice Wells petitioned Lyndon Johnson and the government, since George had served in the military and the cavalry in the 13th Troop. And so they buried him, and not his body, his ashes, in Arlington National Cemetery. And my father went to Alice and handed her the briefcase. Even George had given it to him to do it specifically. He thought that the ethical and the right thing to do was to return it to Alice. And Alice said to him that she wants him to come and the family to come and help her construct the Adamski Foundation and to carry on the work. And in 1972, we moved to Vista, California. And for the last decade or so of their lives, Alice Wells and Martha Ulrich, which was both with him since the 30s, we took care of them and provided care and worked on newsletters together and worked to promote as much as we could. And on all that material and copyrights were left to my father and family in order to continue the work. These copyrights are still in function until 2047, in which time I won't be here anymore either, so that's fine. So that's in a nutshell. In a nutshell, that is the examination of the Adamski photographs. And as I am going through this material today, I thought, after I wrote my last book, I thought, boy, that was a lot of work. I'm not going to do that again. But as I started to go through the material today and the archives that I have and information I have, I thought, well, maybe I'll start throwing things together in a file and typing a little bit and constructing a little bit there, and maybe put together a, I won't say comprehensive, because not everything can be discussed.
The best of.
Put together a very, shall we say, revealing biography on George Adamski, certainly much, much more substantive than the type of garbage that has been written up about him up until now.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. I think I, some years ago, said perhaps it was a good idea to make a biography, either for yourself, which you have actually done in your book, as part of it anyway, of your family. But Adamski maybe deserves a biography. It could be a great idea, Glenn. It could
Well,
be
the future
with
will
some of the lost photographs that you have just found.
Well, not only that, yeah, the two we just found in my
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
That shows you how good I
yeah,
am. I looked at them and I said, "Where the hell did those come
yeah,
from?"
yeah, yeah, but
And so some of that and some of the information,
yeah,
because I think the people should be able. You go into Wikipedia. Here's
yeah,
the interesting thing, and nothing but negative stuff
yeah,
is written about George
yeah.
Adamski. Now, they claim that they have a forum that if you supply them with counter information along with the facts that sustain that they will adjust it. I've done it 3 times. They've ignored it.
Yeah,
I've actually they've actually got a mechanism where you can type it in and
yeah,
it goes into a temporary page. They washed it clean.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
said, okay, well, there's more one way to win this. So I contacted some people, associates and friends around the country, and asked them to do it from a different IP number in their computer and a different address and a
The same
different name,
happened. The same
and
happened.
exactly the same
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But in their defense, they say, well, we took this from material from people who had written in about Adamski. And I said, well, wait a minute. How come you select all the garbage
Yeah,
and print that and
yeah,
don't challenge them to prove it? And then when I supply you with facts to prove otherwise, you say you don't want anything to do with it.
yeah.
Some people are lucky that I'm not super rich. Otherwise, I would keep attorneys busy night and day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you can now you can conclude why they wipe it clean every time. They don't like the name Adamski.
Oh, of course not.
Yeah.
The whole UFO community doesn't like the name
Yeah.
Adamski because
It's quite, but I find that so puzzling because the man who has the most data, which everybody was, claims they want, and they don't want to touch it. A person who
right,
has the most data.
that's right. When I
Just think about that.
reprinted the book Behind the Flying Saucer Mystery 2, which basically is a composite of George's third book, Flying
Yeah.
Saucers Farewell,
Well, yeah,
and a section which I added to it stating this type of information.
yeah, very good information.
And made it available. I came across archives from letters like people like Frank Edwards, who was the syndicated columnist that
Yep.
lost his job because of that and wrote the book Flying Saucer Serious Business. He had nothing nice to say about George in print, but I've got letters from him where
Yep.
he's asking George, can you give me information? What do you think about that? They all sought to consult him
Yeah, privately, but not
under the
publicly.
table.
Yeah.
That's the same thing, and that's the same thing that happened with Major Kehoe. The same
Yeah.
thing. I've got those letters, and I've included in that book too. And I
Yeah.
said, "Gee, if he was such a bad guy, what are you doing asking him for facts for?"
Yeah, think about it, They knew that he was a person who had data which they could use.
And here's the difference between Adamski and my father did the same thing.
Yeah,
If people came to him looking genuinely for information,
yeah.
he would never divulge or expose them
Nope.
because it was more important
Yeah.
to get the information out to cause some good.
Yeah,
But what
exactly.
happens today? These people in the UFO community all running around and say, oh, well, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I talked to Dr. So-and-so, and I'm so-and-so, and this and that. That they feel that the only way that they can validify their interpretation is by compressing it by so-called names that were going to make them feel like they had something to say. Well, George could have done the same thing. He went on a world tour. He went to the UK to lecture. Lord Louis Mountbatten was one of his sponsors.
Yeah.
Who doesn't know the last Viceroy of India and the uncle of Prince Philip?
Yeah.
Lord Dowden, who was the Lord Air Marshal for all the aviation Air Force in England, was one of his sponsors, along with Lord Dowden.
Yeah.
Sir Desmond Leslie, who wrote the book, co-authored Flying Saucers Have Landed, and whose entire section in the front deals with the Indian Sanskrit in relationship to the description of these saucers.
Yeah.
You watch a television show, and I'm not going to mention their name, but you can find them easy enough.
We know who they are.
And they do a whole program on that and don't mention a word about Desmond Leslie and his research way before everybody else. And that's because with Desmond Leslie comes the association with George Adamski. And once again, they have to cut that off.
Yeah, yeah.
You got to wonder how fearful how spineless and fearful can these people be when they're afraid of an old man who talks about human beings and not monsters, a better way of life, a more inclusive with the rest of creation way of life, and a way for us to advance both as a species and as a people and as a humanity. How can that be a threat?
Yeah, exactly. Think about that. Think about why a positive development for our civilization can be bad. Mm-hmm. Who has not got that interest?
That's right. So what if I want to tell a story about some weird-ass creature that comes from space that wants to drill and do all kinds of disgusting things to our bodies? Oh, my God. We're ready to grab onto that and say, oh, that is fantastic.
That's an interesting story. Let's do a documentary on that.
Yeah. Well, as I said to you and we both agreed, sometimes it's nice just to go up into nature and say, you know, I need to get away from people because there are some messed up things.
Glenn, I want to thank you for today's program because we had a lot to show and to talk about, and it's always a pleasure. Glenn, thank you very much.
I agree. Thank you so much, Renee, for your time and all your efforts and for your confidence to be able to talk and to bounce things off. I know I'm not always right about everything, thank God. And my wife continually reminds me of that. But the idea is that one needs an intelligent avenue to be able to talk and respect enough that you can find contrary views and start to place it. Because if you are only locked within yourself, how far can you get?
Yeah, exactly. Glenn, a good way to end this. I'll stop the recording now.